Impenetrable dark clouds loomed over the New England sky in late October. Relentless rain pounded the upscale residential area of Maple Street. The avenue of old trees, still holding on to the last remnants of fall colors, reflected the streetlights irregularly through their rain-soaked leaves. Emily Wilson stepped out into her garden, concerned about her plants and wearing a raincoat. At 38, she had built a respected career as a real estate appraiser and maintained both financial and emotional independence in this quiet neighborhood. Her 6-year marriage to Michael appeared perfect on the surface. However, since the disappearance of their twins 3 years ago, there had been an unfillable void in her heart. This rain might affect tomorrow's appraisal, she muttered, looking up at the dark sky. Gardening had become her solace. While maintaining cordial relationships with her neighbors, it provided precious moments to confront her inner solitude. A sudden thunderclap rolled overhead, and as if in response, the back gate creaked. Emily froze. A dark figure approached through the dimness. Through the curtain of rain, a shadowy form emerged. "Who's there?" Her voice trembled. Then, in the next moment, "Mom, help me." Emily's body went rigid at that voice. Standing there, soaking wet, was her son Ethan, one of the twins who had disappeared 3 years ago, now grown to 13. His gaunt frame, overgrown hair, and mud-stained clothes couldn't hide the fact that this was undeniably her son. "Ethan, is it really you?" Emily started to rush toward her son but stopped short at his desperate expression. In the boy's eyes lurked an indescribable terror. "Mom, we have to help my brother. Dad has him, in Grandma's basement." Ethan pleaded, shivering in the rain, his whole body trembling. His voice carried the weight of 3 long years. Memories of that day 3 years ago flashed through Emily's mind like a film reel. That ordinary morning when the twins were 10. The usual rushed preparations, casual breakfast table conversation, driving them to school. Then the mounting anxiety when they didn't return at the expected time. The frantic search efforts, running through the neighborhood, calling the school, filing police reports, and still no sign of her 2 boys. Most perplexing had been the reactions of those around her. Michael's unnatural calmness. His repeated assurances that they'll turn up. Her mother-in-law Martha's emotional void. Her unnaturally prepared-sounding statement that children come back on their own. Their reluctance to search. All of it now took on new meaning. Looking at her son before her, Emily couldn't hide her turmoil and confusion. At first, she thought he might be a hallucination, but when she touched him, he was undeniably real. Cold, wet clothes, a trembling body, and the warmth of life. She struggled between surging emotions and the need to stay calm. While her maternal instincts screamed out, the analytical skills she'd honed as a real estate appraiser kept her thinking clearly. She hesitated about sheltering him in the house. Calculating the time until her husband's return. Michael usually came home at 7 p.m., but lately his schedule had become irregular. While checking Ethan's state of exhaustion, she remained tensely aware of the neighbor's watchful eyes. Everything swirled in her mind. "Let's get you inside, at least. You'll catch cold in this rain." Emily made her decision and led Ethan in through the back door. As they passed through the kitchen into the living room, she noticed photos of Michael's first wife arranged in an unnatural pattern. There was a locked drawer in her husband's study she'd never paid attention to before, and their elderly housekeeper Agatha wore an unusually anxious expression. Moreover, calls from her mother-in-law had become abnormally frequent these past few days. On Ethan's wrist gleamed an expensive watch inappropriate for his age, a Rolex Datejust, the same model her husband owned. This rainy night reunion would dramatically alter Emily's life. But she didn't yet know that this night was merely the prologue to a long darkness. Nor did she realize that deeper in that darkness lurked even darker secrets that New England's old money families had kept hidden. A fire burned in the living room fireplace, its light illuminating the anxious faces of mother and son. Emily placed a hot cup of tea before Ethan. The herbal aroma slightly eased the tense atmosphere. The boy held the cup with trembling hands, occasionally glancing nervously out the window. The rain continued to pound heavily, providing an eerie accompaniment to their hushed conversation. "Take your time, Ethan. Tell me what you can." Emily spoke gently. Her heart constricted at the sight of her son's expression, showing both fear and hesitation about speaking. "At Grandma's villa," Ethan began in a low voice, carefully choosing his words. "We were kept captive. Aiden is still in the basement." Emily felt her spine turn to ice at these words. "Only I was allowed outside. But under strict surveillance, couldn't go to school." "Grandma." Ethan's words caught in his throat. "Dad," but he had no choice. Behind these cryptic words lay an unimaginable reality. His concern for Aiden's health. References to Grandma's medication time. His testimony about his grandmother's abnormal reactions when mentioning the first wife's name. Everything carried ominous shadows. Emily sprang into action immediately. First, preparing to hide Ethan. She readied the unused attic, taking precautions to avoid neighbors' notice. She covered the windows with old curtains in double layers and prepared an emergency escape ladder. Using her real estate expertise, she began investigating her mother-in-law's villa. Opening her computer, she checked property tax records and meticulously examined the history of building permits for the area. There she found records of suspicious renovations from 2 years ago, basement expansion and the addition of soundproofing. Everything matched Ethan's testimony. Consulting the police hit predictable walls. Detective Jim Collins, who had once led the missing persons investigation, had lost his previous enthusiasm. His eyes were vacant even when presented with new information. "We need evidence, Mrs. Wilson. Hearsay alone." Behind those words lurked her mother-in-law's social influence. Her husband's behavior began showing clear changes. Earlier returns home. Long phone calls locked in his study. Irritably checking around the house. Thorough inspections of the garden and storage shed. All as if searching for something. His attitude toward Emily changed unnaturally as well. He would suddenly become kind, then ask loaded questions. "Noticed anything different lately? Has anyone visited?" He scrutinized her outings in detail and showed excessive interest in her friendships. His eyes held something of a cornered animal. The mystery of their financial situation deepened as well. Credit card statements showed unfamiliar large expenses. unexplained bank withdrawals, the existence of new cards, and traces of late-night online gambling. The debt might be larger than she could imagine. The sense of wrongness in the living room grew daily. The first wife's photos seemed to move slightly, repositioned by someone's hand. Twin photos placed in specific locations. The arrangement of photos changing during her mother-in-law's visits. Catching her husband staring at them in the dead of night. The elderly housekeeper Agatha's behavior also suggested she harbored serious secrets. Meaningful sighs, looks of pity directed at Emily. Especially her expression of terror when her mother-in-law's name was mentioned was clearly abnormal. Gestures of wanting to speak but stopping herself. All of it suggested the existence of deep darkness. Pressure from her mother-in-law gradually intensified. Sudden frequent visits. Blatant interference with Emily's work. Excessive interest in neighborhood relationships. And most unnatural was her complete avoidance of any mention of the twins. Forget about those children. It's time to start a new life. Those words held an unfathomable coldness. The unnatural amount of medication her mother-in-law brought. Her husband's midnight soliloquies in his study. The key Ethan possessed. Conversations hinting at the existence of the housekeeper's diary. And fragmentary words suggesting connections to the first wife's family. All mysteries led to deeper darkness. And in that darkness, her other son waited for rescue. The next morning, Emily finished work early and found herself in the local newspaper's archive room. In the dim space, she flipped through newspapers from 7 years ago, searching for articles about Elizabeth Wilson's accident. Death by traffic accident. The article was surprisingly brief. For the death of a daughter from a prominent Boston family, the coverage was abnormally minimal. As if someone had deliberately suppressed the information. This isn't right. Emily frowned. For a family of this standing, it should have received more coverage. Just then, her phone vibrated. A message from elderly housekeeper Agatha. "Ma'am, I found an old notebook. At lunch." At the arranged cafe meeting, Agatha handed over a worn notebook with trembling hands. This belonged to the previous Mrs. Wilson, from her final days. Opening the pages revealed shocking entries. Another argument with mother-in-law. "She says my parenting is wrong. But her idea of perfect parenting. Michael won't say anything. He seems completely controlled by his mother because of the debts. Worried about the twins. The way mother-in-law looks at them, especially Aiden, has become strange lately." The final dated entry was filled with foreboding. "Must escape. Take the children." Emily's hands shook. Investigation into her husband's company revealed new darkness. A history of unnatural personnel transfers. Everything under her mother-in-law's influence. Hidden debts beyond imagination. Traces of suspicious transactions emerging one after another. The first wife's diary was found in a closet. Fear of the mother-in-law, concerns about obsession with the twins. And signs of planning an escape. Everything was starting to connect. Her husband's shadow emerged clearer. Reports of casino sightings, evidence of multiple debts. Total debt exceeding $5 million. all in the palm of his mother's hand. The image of a man who had given up escaping her control became clear. The truth of the confinement came into view. Her mother-in-law's abnormal obsession was rooted in a loss experienced in her youth. A miscarriage from a relationship beneath her social class. Her past attempts to raise her son perfectly as atonement. And now that twisted love was directed at her grandson. Aiden looks just like Elizabeth, Ethan explained in a trembling voice. That's why Grandma thinks my brother is the reborn previous mama. That twisted belief lay at the heart of this confinement drama. Her husband, unable to stop this madness, could only comply. A distorted wish for the perfect family. A young life about to be lost as its price. As all masks fell away, the race against time had begun. Time to rescue Aiden was running short. Before dawn on Friday, Emily was in final discussions with FBI Special Agent Sarah Connors. The information from Ethan and the collected evidence had finally provided enough material to move law enforcement to action. With this much evidence, we can secure a warrant, Sarah said quietly. However, given Mrs. Martha's mental state, we need to proceed with extreme caution. She's likely to behave unpredictably. Emily nodded. The files before her contained Ethan's testimony, collected evidence, and expert opinions on her mother-in-law's mental state. Medical professionals' statements highlighting Aiden's dangerous situation were also included. We're initiating 24-hour surveillance, Sarah pointed to the map. Medical teams are standing by. We also have psychiatrists ready for any contingency. The rain had stopped, and morning mist hung in the air. Reports came in from investigation teams positioned around the villa. Surveillance of target building initiated. Suspicious renovation traces confirmed on the north side. In the car, Emily held Ethan's hand tightly. The boy's hand was cold but carried a definite strength. Mom, Aiden. It's going to be all right, Emily embraced her son's shoulders. We'll see him soon. Just then, the radio crackled. Heat source confirmed from basement. Bio readings positive. Emily's heart raced. Ethan's hand trembled more intensely. The operation proceeded quietly. First, neutralizing the property's surveillance cameras. Then, securing cooperation from the staff with promises of protection. The decisive moment came in an unexpected form. Mary, the elderly housekeeper, opened the gates herself. I can't anymore, she said through tears. Please save that child. As the special operations team swiftly deployed through the building, a scream erupted from below. My child. I won't let anyone take him. Martha's distraught voice. Then another voice. It's over, Mother. It was Michael. He too had finally resolved to break this chain of madness. As medical teams rushed in, Aiden was rescued. Though emaciated and pale, he was conscious. Big brother. Mom. At that moment, Ethan broke into a run. The brothers embraced, crying wordlessly. Emily joined their circle, and in the morning sun, the family shared their first embrace in 3 years. Martha was arrested in a state of delirium. Elizabeth. My beloved daughter, she continued to scream obsessively. Perfect family, Perfect. Psychiatrists administered medication, and she was transferred to a hospital. The diagnosis: schizophrenia and delusional disorder. At the end of her twisted love, a family had nearly been torn apart. Michael confessed everything. The debts kept me under mother's control. But that's no excuse, he spoke with an exhausted expression. My weakness put my children in danger. I'll serve my time in prison. The villa's basement yielded a trove of the first wife's belongings and photos. And numerous disturbing records of the obsession with Aidan. All of it was the nightmare created by one woman's twisted fixation. The night passed, and a new morning approached. Spring sunlight now brightened the living room of their suburban home. 6 months had passed since the incident, and Emily had switched to working from home. Through the window, she could see the twins quietly playing catch in the garden. Ethan, throw a little gentler. Aidan's voice carried on the breeze. His condition was gradually improving. Thanks to regular counseling with psychiatrist Dr. Kate Walker and appropriate treatment, his anxiety attacks had become less frequent. The twin bond has been a powerful force in their recovery, Dr. Kate had said during last week's counseling session. Especially Ethan's presence has been anchoring Aidan. And Ethan's sense of responsibility as the older brother is helping him overcome his own trauma. Emily sipped warm coffee, reflecting on her son's changes. The trial had concluded more quickly than expected. Martha was committed to long-term psychiatric care, her criminal responsibility mitigated by diagnoses of schizophrenia and delusional personality disorder. Michael accepted a plea deal and provided full testimony. While receiving treatment for gambling addiction, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. He voluntarily relinquished visitation rights and custody, showing determination to start a new life. Mom, look. Looking up at the voice from the garden, she saw Aidan running toward her with a small bouquet. The boy who once flinched at sudden approaches now came running with a smile. They were blooming in the garden. Aren't they pretty? Yes, very, Emily gently stroked her son's head. Shall we put them in a vase? Ethan followed into the house. His eyes no longer held shadows of fear. Instead, they showed quiet confidence. The teacher said, Ethan began while washing his hands in the kitchen, we might be able to go back to school next month. Aidan showed a slightly anxious expression. It's okay, Ethan put an arm around his brother's shoulders. I'll be with you. The new school understood their situation and had prepared a gradual reintegration program. Special support teachers were assigned, and arrangements were made for the brothers to study in the same class. The children's resilience is truly remarkable. The support group facilitator had observed. Emily too had begun participating in support activities. Connecting with families who shared similar experiences helped heal her own emotional wounds. New family photos adorned the living room walls. Not formal poses like before, but natural smiles of the three of them enjoying a picnic in the park. Next to them, a whiteboard listed the twins' new goals. Future dream, become a baseball player, in Aidan's writing. Goal, go to high school with my brother, in Ethan's determined hand. The scars wouldn't completely disappear. But this family had the strength to move forward while carrying them. Outside, spring winds rustled new leaves, announcing the arrival of a new season. Emily quietly looked up at the sky. The terror of that rainy night had transformed into tangible hope. She reached for her coffee cup once more. In the warm afternoon sunlight, they were ready to take new steps forward.